Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy! Dear Destro Warlocks, let me tell you why you shouldn't be sad because of all the nerfs that you are having right now in life, because in Dragonflight, Destro is so fucking awesome! Alright, I know I always get excited about this, but I'm excited about Warlock because Warlock is a dear class to me, and I'm not the biggest fan of how they're doing Destro right now, although it's stupid fun. But this playstyle and a lot of other playstyles are being taken and, in my humble opinion, iterated in Dragonflight a lot better and made more interesting with more choices to them. So that's what we're gonna be looking at today in this Dragonflight Alpha coverage with the new build that's been released for us to test that has the Warlock talents, and we're looking at destruction. And if you like what you're seeing, consider hitting that like and subscribe button and enable those bell notification thingies so that you can get notified when we put a lot of this out, because we do this daily, and sometimes you just might know because the algorithm is just weird. Sometimes it just doesn't let people know that we're putting out videos. So 3 clicks and you'll get pretty much all of our videos into your feed. Plus, it helps the channel. You give a little back. It's 3 clicks. What? No. All right, thank you. Let's actually talk about the talents. And seeing as how this is the first Warlock video that we have about Dragonflight Alpha, let's quickly look at the general talent tree. I'm not gonna spend too much on this, because if you are basically passionate about the spec, you might have already checked them out on Wowhead, and if not, I'll give you a rundown and I won't spoil like everything there is to it. But the very top of the talent tree before you reach the first gate is very, let's say, generic, right? You have your Fell Domination, you have your Burning Rush, you have all of that stuff. A lot of tankiness, a lot of utility, and you might also notice something that will and should catch your eye. On the left-hand side of the tree, you have Spell Lock, which is your interrupt. Now, normally, this would be your Fell Hunter's interrupt ability. However, this is now separate, because if you have been playing Warlock for any amount of time, you know that you have a specific spell in your spellbook called Command Demon that transforms depending on what demon you have out, and if you have a Fell Hunter, it transforms into the Spell Lock ability. Now you have 2 of these if you do decide to run a Fell Hunter, and obviously have 2 kicks, which is, I don't know if it's intended, but it is fun and it is funny going from a class that had very weak interrupt abilities to having 2 now. And obviously this also opens up the possibility of you playing an Imp or playing a, I don't know, a Voidwalker or a Succubus for whatever reason, and still having an interrupt while having something that's a little bit more reliable than a Fell Hunter. But I'm mostly talking about the Imp here, since it is a castable casting minion and doesn't really hit those pathing issues that a lot of pets have in World of Warcraft. And there's, once again, like I said, a lot of utility that I'm not gonna go into, like Mortal Coil and Halaturn, Banish and all that stuff, because it's pretty obvious it is part of the general Warlock kit, and as opposed to them taking a lot of space in your talents like they do now, they're neatly spread out, so you can pretty much take whatever you want and build the Warlock that you so desire, which is great. And also with the amount of tankiness that you have, or actually will have in Dragonflight, I haven't played a single spec that's not a tank that's as tanky as Destruction, and by extension Affliction and Demonology as well, but Destruction especially, since you do probably have some of the most interesting single target damage. You're the tankiest non-tank spec in the game, if things will shape out the way that they are right now, which, I mean, sure, why not? Warlocks have historically very poor mobility, and Burning Rush is obviously consuming your HP. Gates are specifically used to help your group bypass mechanics, so it's not something that you can relaxively use at your own leisure to move around. And teleport is not really mobility, it's kind of like coming back to a point, or if you preemptively set it up before an encounter, you can teleport to that, but it's not the same. It's not like it's a blink for a mage, right? So having more tankiness where you're gonna just be hit by more shit might just make it better, and obviously, you know, you still respect your healers and move out of the fire. But outside of that, there are a couple of nodes that you might be interested in, and one of those is Demonic Inspiration, which gives you 5% haste to your pet once you fill up a Soul Shard, and Wrathful Mini, which is kind of a little bit to the side of it, that gives your pet 5% damage after you fill a Soul Shard once again. So likely if you take both of these, they'll run in conjunction. Now, Destruction doesn't really have a lot of pet damage, and as part of the Warlock fantasy, if you do decide to play Grimoire of Sacrifice, these will naturally boost the Grimoire of Sacrifice as well, which I guess great. They're throughput nodes, so likely you will not want to avoid them. Luckily, they're only 1 point each, which is fucking surprising. Like, color me surprised, because I would have expected throughput nodes to be like those annoying 2-pointer or 3-pointer nodes, but not this time. And if you keep going down, you'll see Grimoire of Synergy, which is likely going to be the mandatory point for all Warlock specs, no matter what you do, because it's realistically the Shadowlands legendary, the Demonic Synergy legendary, which, I mean, it's good. It's a whole legendary power packed into one node, so you will want this. Now, outside of all the utility and the tankiness and the cooldowns and everything else that you do have in the tree, there will be the last, I think, last 2 rows, even though they're kind of unlocked behind some utility spells. The last 2 rows are pure throughput, pure damage output, which is pretty cool. And it's nice that the pathing of the talent tree is in such a way where you're not 100% restricted as to where you're going. However, going on to the left-hand side, that's kind of feeling more demo-oriented. You have Pact of the Imp Mother, which at this point makes that your primary pet, or if you have Grimoire Sacrifice talented, when they deal damage, their damage is increased by 1% up to 5%. And after it reaches 5 seconds, it resets. Obviously, for Affliction and Destruction, I don't know how strong this can be. It's still 5% pet damage. It's nice. On 1 point, obviously, it goes up if you point into it twice. And I don't know if you're gonna be that interested, although Grimoire of Sacrifice might be worth it, but we'll see. And I'm only saying that you might not be interested, or if you don't put more points, because you likely want Soul Conduit, which is there, which has kind of been a generic capstone or close to a capstone talent tree for Warlock for a while. And you probably might want this more than the Imp Mother, and you might not have points to spare for the Imp Mother because there will be other stuff. Now, Summon Jailer is, you summon basically a demon pet that just blasts the enemy based on how much, well, they call it tormented souls you've collected. Now, I believe this functions similarly to the Affliction style artifact weapon from Legion, where after you've killed souls, they kind of are like ghosts that you kind of collect. Now, once you've killed targets and you've kind of collected their souls, they stack up until you summon the Jailer, which obviously is not implemented right now. We don't know exactly what's the cooldown of it. We know it scales off of 100% spell power for every 1 second for every soul consumed, so it depends. It sounds like it could be a 3-minute cooldown. We don't know if the damage that the Jailer does is AoE or single target, because that obviously will influence where you will use it. It kind of sounds like it might be a single target cooldown for bosses, where you might slap the bosses really hard. Although, would you use it in raids? Would you have enough targets to kill to consume all these souls? Do you have to like prep beforehand? Because also it does say that you can collect torment souls from each target that you kill, and occasionally escaped souls you previously collected. I don't know what that means. It's a lot of vagueness to it. It sounds really cool, but until it's implemented, we don't know anything about it. Now, closer to the middle, actually straight smack dab in the middle, you have Pact of the Aniline, whatever, which is together with Decimating Bolt right underneath it, and Inquisitor's Gaze on the right hand side, which is like a 10-second cooldown. You summon a Inquisitor's Eye, which kind of reminds me of Kilrog's Eye, that attacks your enemies for 1 hour. Obviously, since it lasts for 1 hour and you can summon it every 10 seconds, it feels like, it reminds me of the Arcane Mage, Arcane Familiar, where it's just like a little passive, little floaty thing around you that just zaps things every now and again. I wouldn't expect this to have a lot of damage packed into it, considering that's pretty much a permanent thing. But by the grace, we don't know, because it's still not implemented. Also, Decimating Bolt is, you know, the Necrolord Decimating Bolt, which I don't know. It's fine. It's damage. It's execute damage. So we'll talk more about that, since it does buff Incinerate, and there are, I would say, more Incinerate buffs in the general spec tree than what you probably have right now in Shadowlands. And on the right hand side, you have another pact, which seems to be the theme, Pact of the Eredar, which, oh, by the way, I didn't mention that with the Pact of the Aniline, essentially what it does is makes Rain of Fire deal 5% additional damage to enemies affected by Immolate, so it's clearly like an AoE-ish version, which, I mean, that's great, because, you know, you kind of want Immolate on the target, so it kind of, you know, teaches you how to play the spec properly. And Pact of the Eredar additionally makes your Chaos Ball damage increase the damage of your Immolate by 5% for 6 seconds, so likely this is single targety, cleave oriented, depending on how you're going to be spreading your Chaos Bolt. This is an interesting talent. Obviously, it's purely single target, but I would be surprised to see how it's going to be used in AoE, because there is a specific talent in the Destro tree that lets your Chaos Bolt cleave onto more targets. So I don't know if that also procs the damage of Immolate, but likely, since keeping up Immolate 100% of the time is a single target thing, that's probably where we're going to be using it. And Dimensional Rift. Dude, for the life of me, I cannot remember if this was the artifact ability in Legion for Destro, because I've only played it very briefly. But I digress. The way that it is now, it's a 45-second recharge with 3 charges, and once you pop it, you summon like a little portal that zaps the target for actually quite a bit of damage. It's kind of like Lego mentioned, the machine gun kind of thing, and it generates 3 soul shard fragments. Soul shard fragments are 3 soul shard fragments is not that much. Obviously, it's nice. It, you know, adds on top of what your Immolate generates and what you're actively generating from your rotation. And on top of that, you can also summon all 3 portals at the same time, and they blast really hard. It seems to blast in single target. I couldn't honestly feel how good it was in AoE. The damage is nice. I definitely see it probably in AoE being used for the shard generation, for the soul shard generation, even if it's a little, because 3 soul shard fragments with the 3 charges should probably barely equate a soul shard, if the system is still 10 soul shard fragments per 1 soul shard. But we'll see. It's an added resource. It does a lot of damage. It's actually kind of fun and fuels your shard economy. And now we go into the general, the spec talents rather, which similar to what you might have been seeing so far in all of the specs. At the top of the tier, you'll have the core abilities: Chaos Bolt, Conflagrate, Rain of Fire, to name the couple of 3 that you have right at the top. And obviously they spread sideways to their respective upgrades, kind of indicating where the tree is headed, where probably more AoE Rain of Fire is on the right-hand side. Not probably, it is. And Conflagrate's single targety to the left-hand side. Straight down the middle, though, you will get Havoc, or you can get Mayhem. Havoc is the Havoc that you might know. Mayhem is not yet implemented, so I couldn't really test it, but it is passive and makes your spell have a 25%, I would imagine, chance to strike a nearby target for 60% of its normal damage, meaning that you don't really have to worry about Havoc windows. Now, there are obviously pros and cons. Obviously, there's a lot of RNG into this one. However, if you're consistently fighting in high AoE and you don't really care about windows, you just want that consistent damage, Mayhem might be the thing. Whereas if you want to have that focus damage, like, you know, okay, I'm popping my cooldowns, this is what I want to cleave all my Chaos Bolts, you're using Havoc there, or maybe you want to use Havoc as a soul shard generator in massive AoE fights, who knows. Those are probably the niches that you will want to consider while choosing one of these 2 points. And lower down you have another choice node, which is Reverse Entropy and Internal Combustion, which have been kind of a choice between the 2 for 3 expansions now, right? I don't know if they go earlier than Legion, probably in WoD, if I recall. Jesus, it's been so long. They're still the same. They're the ones that you know, and not much else to say about them. But if you keep going down, you will have Pandemonium and Cry Havoc. Now, I'm not sure if these were old spells that were brought back, but as far as I'm concerned, they're new tools to play with, even if they were in the game before. And Cry Havoc is an interesting upgrade and seems to do quite a bit of damage if you will use Chaos Bolt in AoE. And this is what I've been talking about a minute ago when we talked about the general talent trees. Like, when you slap Havoc on a target and you slap that target with Chaos Bolt, the Chaos Bolts cleave into AoE. So they obviously hit more than just the potential 2 targets that you would normally hit, but for a little bit less damage. Now, obviously, damage and tuning aside, that all comes down to the final iteration of destruction. But if the current vision for the talent is put forward, the amount of damage that it deals is about 20% of a Chaos Bolt per target hit. It doesn't say that it has a target cap, and I couldn't really test because we couldn't really pull that many targets. However, 20%, by the way, 20%, that's the damage that it deals, is non-crit, and that is like, if my Chaos Bolt on a training dummy hits for 10k, this one hits for 2k. The 10k is crit, but the 2k is not crit, so I don't know what that means. But if you have, let's say, about 5 targets or more, likely this Cry Havoc might be better, since you might end up doing more AoE damage, and that is if you're in a situation where in AoE you would be spamming your shards on Chaos Bolts and not Rain of Fire, which I guess is a nice way, because mid-size packs, mid-size AoE was kind of a weird situation for destruction, where when is it good to use Chaos Bolts, when is it good to use Rain of Fire, right? So this kind of solves it. You just you slap Havoc and you slap that Havoc target with Chaos Bolts. Pandemonium just makes both Mayhem and Havoc, whichever one you picked, better. Havoc lasts longer, Mayhem has 10% more chance to proc its thing, so a little bit less RNG. Rolling Havoc, we already know it. If I'm not mistaken, this was initially a Nazarite trade in BFA, and it's coming back as a talent, and then you keep going down. You have Backlash, which gives you 2% critical chance, and also probably a PvP effect or an open world effect, where if you get hit by melees, it gives you a chance to make your next Incinerate free of cast, which is something that I think Balance has as well, but I digress. And if you keep looking through the tree, you'll see a lot of old spells that I don't want to go too much into. Spells like Soulfire, Shadowburn, Channel Demon Fire, and all of that. They're kind of spread mostly to the left-hand side of the tree, but obviously you have Cataclysm all the way to the right-hand side. And there's a lot of nodes that just increase raw damage, flat damage, or overall damage of spell X or Y or A and B or whatever, which I guess that's great. Not particularly a fan of those, but I don't particularly see a problem, since I actually kind of like the Destruction talent tree. And if we go to the right-hand side, you will see that all the way to the downside, you obviously go through Infernal and Cataclysm and some Soul Shard and Incinerate buffs and a lot of Conduits, and you will end up with the capstones that is the tier set currently, which is obviously a contentious topic since it's seeing massive nerfs currently on live, and it's hard to tell exactly how it's going to act in Dragonflight, since we couldn't really test it with a particular talent, which I will mention in a moment. But first of all, the tier set effect is broken down into 3 talent nodes. Ritual of Ruin is the first one, and this just gives you your 2 set, but with 15 shards cost instead of 10, while Masteral Ritual is down below. A 2-choice node makes it so that it costs 10 shards to get the proc of Ritual of Ruin, and Avatar of Destruction gives your Blasphemy effect, which is the 4 set, which not sure if this is what I meant. I'm not sure if it works with Reign of Chaos, because this is obviously something that has been nerfed for this show going into season 4, and this is a mechanical nerf and not a numbers tuning nerf, although it indirectly affects numbers as well. But we don't know if it works with Reign of Chaos in Dragonflight, or if it has the Season 4 iteration, because there weren't enough points to go all the way to Reign of Chaos, although at level 70 you will be able to have enough points to do it. And it depends on what the philosophy of the talent that they will take forward, because it would be cool to work with Reign of Chaos. That was a fun interaction outside of the numbers that were pretty crazy. Having that interaction was really cool to see those Infernals back-to-back slap down. Now, even if it doesn't do that, I actually don't mind it at all, even though that is something that has been attracting me to Destro this season, because there are so many sources of generating soul shards, like, Dimensional Rift that I mentioned from the general talent tree. And obviously you have Burn to Ashes that adds, this is kind of, I feel like, a new one that adds some possible single target into it, since your priority or at least priority damage, since you will do more damage with Incinerate from either Chaos Bolt or Rain of Fire, or both. That will buff your Incinerate by 15%. And stacks up to 4 times. So, and obviously this is a 2-choice node, so it depends on how many points you want to spend here, because if you do want to end up on the left-hand side where the Infernal is, and we will get to that, I don't know how many points you can spare for this, unless you go just heavily on the right-hand side. But before we go to the left-hand side, the middle side is the more generic side, but does have a lot of passives. I mentioned Backdraft, you'll notice Eradication and Ashen Remains, which Ashen Remains essentially is a Conduit, Eradication is a talent, similar to Rolling Havoc from BFA, like I mentioned before. Also, if you go down towards the capstone, you will notice the Ajakir legendary that also now affects Rain of Fire, not just Chaos Bolt, which, I mean, that's actually pretty great, because it is connected to both the middle side and the right-hand side, where if you went to the right-hand side, you would have had a lot of Rain of Fire fillers. So seeing that this can also affect Rain of Fire is kind of interesting, because I'm a strong advocate of, making Rain of Fire deal damage in AoE, as opposed to what we had in BFA, which is why I kind of like how Destro is being designed in Shadowlands more so than BFA. Now, you do have the Chaos Incarnate capstone, which is an interesting capstone, but a little bit hard to discern how good it is. Haven't had a chance to play with it because I did want to test the tier set to see how it works and the infernal build as well. But Chaos card, even if I was gonna test it, I don't know exactly what I'm looking at because it does make spells benefit from 100% of your from the maximum effect of your mastery, because you know your mastery scales your damage buffs from a range, but you do have power overwhelming, which is something that goes into Chaos Incarnate that could make this extremely interesting. And I feel like it could be something that's more single target focused, although I do see it in very high octane AoE. But this is very delicate in terms of the numbers, so until we tune it, until we sim it, I don't know exactly what I'm looking at. And on the left-hand side, you'll see, like I mentioned, all the usual suspects, the Channel Demon Fire and Shadowborn and all that, and all going all the way down, you'll have Infernal, which is normally, you would see like a core cooldown like this in the middle side of the tree for most specs, but this is on the left-hand side. And obviously it's the Infernal, and you do have a couple of upgrades for it. You have Crashing Chaos, which is a little bit to the left-hand side, which makes the Summon Infernal to reduce the Soul Shard cost of your next 3 casts of Chaos Bolt, Shadowborn, or Rain of Fire. Now, I don't know how much you would want to cast Shadowburn instead of Chaos Bolt, since obviously, again, this comes down to tuning. But if we're gonna assume that you're gonna be casting Chaos Bolt, this can be massive for your single target burst, especially when you summon your Infernal. Although it does probably have some applications normally in Rain of Fire as well, but it's so far off from the right-hand side of the tree that this is why I mentioned that I don't know how many points you can spare for some of these talents. But if you do want to play, let's say, an AoE Rain of Fire centric playstyle, and you do want to go to take your Infernal as well, you can get Crashing Chaos, and I'm glad that they made it so that Infernal branches out to 2. Similarly, 2 choice nodes, one that is clearly AoE, the Crashing Chaos, and the Infernal brand, which is clearly single target, where it makes your Infernal's melee attacks, which obviously it attacks only one target in melee, make the target take 15% increased damage from your immolation, which I feel like this either was an Azurite before or is a Conduit right now that I'm not aware of, probably because maybe it wasn't tuned, but I feel like it was an Azurite in BFA. And obviously the melees increase the damage that the target takes from your, the Infernal's immolation by 15%, and it stacks up to 15 times. And if we keep going down, you have the Rain of Chaos that I mentioned before, and if the and I would imagine that Infernal brand works with Rain of Chaos as well. So if you do summon a bunch of Infernals, that target takes more and more and more and more damage from its immolate, which is cool. It's single target, even though Immolate is an AoE ability, or an AoE passive rather. And Rain of Chaos is at a choice node with Wilfrid's. Both of them are really interesting Infernal upgrades. Both of them very specific, very niche oriented, so it depends probably what you are looking for when you're trying to build your Infernal, which is very neat. I'm usually, obviously, whenever you have to choose between one and the two and not be able to get both, it's kind of weird, so it's maybe never really always fun, but having a little bit of a restriction can create some creativity, can birth some creativity rather, and being able to choose between these two effects can be cool, even though you can play with both right now on live and have been able to play with both for a while. So yeah, that's kind of how the show is right now. I was actually pleasantly surprised at how it's designed, because I come from a place where I've played a lot of Destro in BFA, where it was very Chaos Ball focused, and going into Shadowlands it kind of skewed a little bit into the Fire playstyle and Rain of Fire, and I was very happy about that. And obviously in Season 3 was like just pure Rain of Fire, right? So whenever it skews into one direction, it just feels weird, but it seems like there's a way to build your ideal destruction, which is what we should have from these talents. So what do you think? Do you think Destro is a worthy main in Dragonflight? Do you like these talents? Obviously, numbers aside, there's still a bunch that I haven't mentioned yet, but there's so many that we could just spend the whole day talking about it. And I probably would, because I love Warlock. And if you do love Warlock and the videos that we make, once again, consider hitting that like button, subscribe, and enable those notifications so that we can get the videos up to your feed quicker, and it obviously helps the channel grow. Thank you for watching the video, thank you to your patrons for supporting the content, and we'll see you guys in the next one. Peace!
I've been loving it then, I still love it now. Still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. Getting better every day, let me show you how. Cause still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. It's getting harder to stay, but at the end of the day, it's a guilty pleasure, so just log in and play. Whether it's classical retail, I'ma do a /bow. Still, I play WoW.